Okay, are we live? All right. So, hello everyone. I wanted to speak. I wanted to speak about the invisible other. And I thought that it's 2023, time has gone forth, and inner wisdom has brewed. And so I thought of recording an episode where I am responding to a specific group of people who have met the invisible other in their inner realms. They have met the unknown in their inner realms. And so I'm here to communicate to those people what are some helpful attitudes to have once you've met the invisible other. I found it fascinating that there are 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And the truth of these creatures is cloaked in various linguistic realities. Pretty much what has happened is that just like matter has, filled up a vacuum, language has filled up the vacuum behind our eyes. We are no longer objects to ourselves. We are characters in stories. These stories give us a sense of reality that is ahead of its time. And so the human being is existing in one dimension, but is experienced in multiple. And so there is a timeless version of you, and there's a version of you in time. And when the time comes, you will realize that there are ways to look at this world where you're not in a known world. You know what I realized? What I'm trying to tell the viewers, and what I'm trying to tell the human species, but I will say that I am a moment of existence, and I have observed this existence. And in my inner realms, sometimes I've had visions of where this existence is going. I have come to terms with my mind. I'm a person who my mind has deceived me. My mind has become my ally. My mind has introduced the divine to me. And also there's been moments where I have realized I'm not a creature of mind. So with these ideas in consideration, and I have this feeling that I know something and I have to give this away before I exit this dimension. That's the feeling I have. So, for anybody who has met the invisible other, for anybody who has had any experiences where they classify as metaphysical or supernatural, or if you have met the divine, Mr. Within will attempt to generally speak about this, which is very difficult, but I'll attempt. So here's the thing. Bunch of creatures on a rock. They have no idea they're creatures. Suddenly they realize they're creatures. They develop language. They develop communication. The creature begins to have recorded events of itself in its mind. Its memory and ability gives it more of a momentum for the development of language and technology. Our ancestors were in some sense nomads. This means that they didn't have a home. They were just roaming the earth as if the whole earth was their living room. But from the nomadic phase, suddenly our ancestors found a chunk of land they could grow food on. So we went to the agricultural phase. From the agricultural phase, we built inventions. And we went to the industrial phase, a very beautiful transition where people who were just like farmers, right? They're like, yo, what am I doing? Feeding my sheep. I'm going to go work in a factory. And little did they know the dangers they were going through, but they decided to go live a new life. And this is the greatest honor on this planet. To be capable during a lifetime to shift gears and live a completely different life. If you have done this, there's karmic reward usually, or some sort of karmic value. I don't know how, but... So, from the industrial phase, we went to urbanization, and people started to live around each other. And now it's so funny, just like a Tetris game, in urban areas, like everybody's trying to crowd themselves in there, There was a time for 2 years, I would pretty much every day in downtown Toronto by Dundas Square, I would be smoking a cigarette in my breaks, just looking at Dundas Square. And something I've had as a hobby is I'm trying to psychologically analyze everything around me since childhood. It's just been a hobby, So I remember I was there in Dundas Square and I was looking at it and I'm like, if I was to write a poem or if I was to write a sentence or some poetic sentence depicting this moment, what would it be? And I came up with this sentence that the downtown areas of countries are where the successful and the defeated walk side by side. They walk in the same streets, yet they don't see each other. And there is an incredible amount of invisibility, right? Like right now on this planet, people are like, yo, racism is fucked up, sexism is fucked up, get your shit together, human species, But when it comes to class, right, it's remarkable, I was privileged to have a sort of kind of like upper middle class childhood in Iran. And I remember, you don't know how many, like I've seen to such a degree, right? How can I tell you? Something that would happen when I was a kid in Iran is that, I don't know, as a kid, anytime an area gets too crowded, too crowded, I get this feeling to like leave the environment, you know? Just as a kid, I've always had that habit, you know, when I feel like too, like a moment feels too suffocating, I just leave. And so I remember when I would get bored, right? My grandmother would have this giant gathering, right? And when I would get bored, I would go to the kitchen, okay? Not to eat food. I wasn't like one of those like, chubby little kids eating food all the time, I wasn't that kind of kid. But I remember I would go in the kitchen and I would hear everybody gossiping about the guests, in the actual room, And what I'm trying to tell you is, dear viewers, is that this life is kind of like a game. It's kind of like Alice in Borderland. Everybody has been given a game they can play. Some game. Do you know? Now, in this game of life, so what I was trying to say is that what I started to realize is that the human species has already stepped into a dehumanization process. This is so ancient that we can't do anything about this point other than probably just appreciate it. Okay, I'll say it this way. Mankind, this creature we are, has been exposed to faster speeds. It has been exposed to faster realities than nature can provide. Simply due to this reason, it will seek out till the end of time an unnatural, dehumanized reality. We can't do anything about it. I thought like, okay, what if some genius finds a way to build giant sequoia trees everywhere, right? And then everybody lives in these giant trees instead of skyscrapers, and slowly we convert the imagery, or we put a technology ban for the next 100 years, no tech companies can progress or something like that, But then I realized it's inevitable. It's one of those chapters that needs to be written. Just like we see birds, I'm telling you, I see it. I can feel it right now. The future generations may give me props for this, but I looked at a sparrow on a branch of a tree, and my mind just jumped. It was literally jumped. It gave me a jump scene. Like literally like a film, my mind cut to a scene where I saw that bird being completely made of an android level, right? There will come a time where I call it the forgetting humanity, but there will come a moment where nature will be seen as sacred. We're taking it for granted now. Do you know? Religious people don't, but many take the world for granted because they don't think it can change. We don't think the world can become way more digital than it is, but it can. And there might be even children lost in cyberspace in the future. When I was a kid, I remember seeing Pokemon and being like, yo, this is fun. But I remember when I grew up and I'm like, what am I looking at? Do you understand? It's a simulation. The kid's in a simulation. When the kid dies, he disappears from the simulation. Pokemon is about the future. Do you know that kid is not in the real world? He's in a machine. He's in a computer. You know, I'm going to declare this, you know. That means this whole childhood, I've thought Ash had to catch all the Pokemon, but Ash wasn't Ash. You know? Just like, you know, video games, when you log into, you know, you're not the character. You are the character in the video game. Outside the video game, you're not the character. That's what I mean. I'm pretty much saying outside of this dimension, you're not this. Like, if there's a chance that's a possibility, then a complete new ideological structure is required. So anyways, as someone giving a talk on helpful attitudes post meeting the invisible other, so I have to prove to the listeners that I have met the invisible other. I have met the invisible other multiple times in my life. There was a point where the invisible other was part of my synchronicity, but my synchronicities changed. You know, for me, the Jungian synchronicity was a phase. It was a phase until I realized everything synchronistically that was happening to me was happening because I was being me. Right now, we're living on a planet where everybody knows that human beings acknowledge physical objects, right? So even you look at like Mad Men, right, and you see that, okay, they at least acknowledge a physical world. Like the mad guy can, like the, you know, the criminal or the insane guy can at least open a door, can at least drive a vehicle, right? You know, so it's as if they're holding certain dimensions of sanity, but in certain dimensions they've gone, something's happened, you know. And of course, guys, when it comes to mental illness, when it comes to analyzing it, we got to be like, okay, is it from the biological system or is it from the cognitive system? Okay, the cognitive system is readjustable. Usually the biological system, unless the technology is there, it's not readjustable. And there's a dark side to psychology, by the way. Right now, psychologists may be standing, you know, like acting like they did nothing wrong, but everybody, like the whole world knows that there was a dark chapter in human psychology, okay? I'm not just saying the savageness of animalism, I'm just saying in the first efforts of the field. Anytime I see something fucked up that happened in the past, I just look at it and I'm like, okay, the past didn't know better. They were just like savage. You know, I honor my ancestors, but the more I go back, further back to honor my furthest ancestor, the more savage I realize they are. Do you know that means if you truly want to honor your ancestor, you're honoring a beast in the jungle? Do you know? And of course, it's important to know where you came from, but we're living at a time where I'm realizing it's important to know where we're going as a species. You know, in my youth, I was a shy person, but there were so many moments where I had seen ahead of the moment and I told the crowd, I told the group, nobody listened, and eventually it became that outcome. Do you know? And you know what I realized? I realized that all those people that seek spirituality, they are actually incredible beings that have tasted existential loneliness. It's a reaction to the unknown. Because let me tell you, I don't know why. I had strangely given a lot of talks before I came fully to this realization. That means, I don't know, strangely as a being, I don't know why, but I think if I've had other lifetimes, I've been repeating this communication algorithm. What that means is, like, there was a time where I thought, could I be this being that anywhere where there's civilizations ready to advance, right? It's as if like Mr.Withins appear anywhere. Like even if a civilization, like we could say even this Mr.Within archetype that I'm being for past civilizations, it's been there too. Do you know? Let me tell you what it is, right? There are, imagine just like an adult looking at a kid, looking at a bunch of kids, right? Imagine you're looking at your like children, okay? And you look at your children as a parent and you're like, okay, what kind of kids are they going to be when they grow up? What kind of people are they going to be, right? And you may have an opinion. And let's say you are a baseball player, okay? Let's say you're a baseball player and you don't know what kind of who your kids are going to be, right? But one thing you are sure of, that it's as if these beings have come to see, to learn from your reality. You see, this is what I found, which is incredible. Like, I don't have kids now, but I feel that the human species is indirectly teaching itself all the time. I have been humbled by nature, by inanimate moments. You know what that means? That means there was a time where I was in this moment where in my inner realms, I was like, yo, am I channeling? Is this another being? Or yo, no, sorry. I was like, yo, I'm writing some next level stuff in 2016, guys. When I visited Iran, I was in this cottage and I started writing something which was about like this new version of the Wheel of Karma, like this new interpretation of the Wheel of Karma. And when I was writing this down, I thought it was from me. And then my inner realms was like, yo, this is not from you. Relax. It's like I'm just showing you something. Do you know? And I laughed so hard. Do you know? For a moment, it was as if I was treating my mind like it was me. But sometimes our mind is a space. To the wise, the mind is like an airport. Do you know how many thoughts have passed through the terminal gates of my mind, of my consciousness? The inner realms is an art form. I find myself privileged to be acquainted with this art form. And any being who demonstrates any sort of talent when it comes to the inner realms, let me tell you this, it's an acquaintance from before. In 2016, before going to Iran, actually, I was in India and I was living in an ashram for 2 months. And I'm this guy who's given like these talks, and before giving these talks in 2014, I wrote like, I don't know, around like 20 books or something. You know, so I went to this guy in India, this so considered enlightened guy. Everybody in the ashram was saying Guruji to him. So I go to this guy and I'm like, hey man, I'm this soul that's just like randomly out of nowhere has had like these information overloads and has written like these books and has given these talks. Like, what does this mean? Right? And just like a movie, guys, just like a movie scene, he looked at me and he was like, Sanskara. And I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, it means impressions. He said, what you see yourself unconsciously doing in this life are like these impressions that you've had from other lifetimes. And I was like, yo, so you're telling me being born in this lifetime is like a video gamer logging into a video game where he's had an account, but he hasn't played for years. And then he's logging back into the account again, you know? The yogic life was a very, very conscious one. They were conscious of the transcendental other. They were conscious of the presence of divinity in the room. You know, they had an honor for the archetype of the god or the goddess, right? But nowadays the world has lost its essence. Do you understand? They have turned a lion. They have caged the lion and redefined it as a sheep. and the lion is eating grass, feeling sick, wondering what sort of life it should be living. Do you understand? The humanity of 2023 is the humanity that knows deep down it should be in a much more advanced reality, but it's not. You know why? Because it's the niceness of waiting. Do you understand? I'm personally, since my youth, my mother once came and told me to be polite, and ever since that day I've been a polite person. Do you know? But you know, there's been moments where I have had an intense rage, right? And the thing about rage is that it's an energy, and the thing about energy is you have two places to release it, either in the outer realms or in the inner realms. And when I was young, because I was shy, I was just releasing everything in the inner realm. So I was like shy. People who are shy don't understand. You are training your imagination because you're not giving yourself a permission to be your real self in the outer realms. You're giving your real self is in your inner realms. So you're actually training yourself to be a very comfortable inner realm entity, inner realm viewer. And it's all for the greatness of humanity, guys, because I sat down and I thought about it over and over and over. And I was like, okay, what do I gain if I live for myself? I was like, okay, I enjoy the ride, you know, I don't have the burden of getting stressed by thinking, like, caring for others and whatnot. But then I was like, okay, what do I get if I live for others? Then I realized, like, okay, do I want to be like, you know, just like a background force in people's lives? You know, that's the thought I had. And I realized living for others can destroy someone if they're living for the wrong person. Do you know? It's like living for a cruel king and living for a kind king, right? For me, back in the day, if I was just a villager and there was a king, I would go serve that king, you know? King or queen or whatever. Just the idea of royalty is something that shouldn't have been forgotten in human history. You know, one day, I hope this day comes about in the future while I'm still alive on this planet. There comes this day where all the people who are from royal bloodlines on the planet, right? Where I've built this headquarters called the School of Athens 2.0, and all the people from royalty are there, and it's as if we have a group discussion and being broadcasted all over the planet, you know, about the idea, the concept of royalty, the value of it. In some sense, our ancestors, sometimes they couldn't live alone. Do you understand? Like people nowadays so easily hate the idea of kings or queens, but do you know how many of your ancestors survived because of them? Do you understand? It was a necessary idea because man was alone. Do you understand? Imagine you were a little kid born in medieval society. What did you have to look up to? All the kids were like, I'm going to be king one day, right? But nowadays in 2023, who do we have to look up to? We have no one. So I sat down and I'm like, if the present has failed to answer the great problem, the past has failed, okay, then in some sense the future is left. The great king that mankind must serve is the future generations that haven't been born yet. It's as if the future king is like the crown is on the head of the future that hasn't been born yet, so the crown is never on the head of a human being. It's on the greatness of the human idea. That is our king. That is our queen. The advancement of humanity. Why else are we here? Why else are we being human beings? Why else are you believing different stories and noticing all these stories come and go and change? How many different Mr.Within talks have you listened to? How many different moments has the reality animated? So it's not about an ideological knowledge. It's about, in some sense, you realizing that you are here to acquaint yourself with the nature of an experiential entity. Do not be entranced by language. Break those walls and go beyond. Because to be a philosopher back in the day, okay, sure, you had a bunch of ideas, good job. Nowadays, to be a philosopher means you, in some sense, like find your sword like King Arthur, and in some sense, try to pierce the veils of ignorance that are denying the species its advancement. The greatness of humanity is a movement, dear viewers. How you move is advanced. In my stillness, there is no advancement because everything is present at once. Who are we living for? And what are we living for? So, now I'm going to speak to those with a spiritual context, okay? So anybody who's secular minded, you might be like, okay, what is Mr. Within saying? Like, I can probably explain it to you, but right now I'm going to just speak to the New Age community, okay? The New Age community are all those who are in some sense living an inner life which is a symbiosis with fiction. So I am saying anybody on the planet who in their mind is interacting with anything that can be considered fiction, and to you it might be truth and reality, that's totally fine in your inner realms. Your inner realms is your private server. Your outer realms is your public server. What Mr. Within is asking is that all human beings, I don't care how you are in your inner realms, that's your private server, your imagination is your own art studio, be whoever, whatever kind of being you want to be, okay? But in the outer realms, it is important that slowly the human species begins adopting a sort of collective subjective responsibility. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying that we have to start behaving like advanced beings before we build the advanced civilization. And people are like, Mr. Within, is it even possible, in 2023 as human beings to do something to experience an advanced civilization? I would say we are blessed to experience the greatest phase of an advanced civilization. When Mr. Within wants to build an advanced civilization, I call it civilization 2.0 on this earth. A lot of people are like, yo, this guy's sense of humor is otherworldly. But I'm being dead serious, I have found a way where, I don't know, if I was to say what is one of my hidden talents, it's in some sense civilization design. If there was a team of the most advanced beings building the most advanced thing, I feel like I need to be in that team right now. But because I can't find that team and that team can't find me, so I am in this position where I have to start my own team. It's as if you wait for the opportunity, and if you see it's taking too long, then you honorably create the opportunity. Mr. Within is an archetype that is poetically a similar archetype given to maybe another person on this planet like Rishi Vyasa. Rishi Vyasa was known as the teacher of teachers. He was known as the incarnation of God in language. And what that meant was that he was a divine being, but he was a divine being in the authority of the realm of God's mind, not God's soul. Okay? Most likely after this lifetime, that's where I'm going. I'm done with dealing with God's poetically God, the God body and the God mind. And then it's in some sense poetically, it's like, do you know what it is? I'm kind of like a guest. Earth to me is like a house party, and I'm like a guest, and I don't know who the host is, but the host is not at the house party. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like at the end of this life, I'm leaving this world to go meet the host, to go meet the origin, you know? To be like, okay, who did this? You know, it's like you can't show me a world and not show me who did it. You know what I mean? So, dear viewers, my laptop has 9%. I'm going to read something. This is from the internet. The concept of an invisible other is used in different ways in various spiritual and religious traditions. But in Theosophy, it refers to the idea of a hidden or spiritual realm that is beyond the physical world we see and experience. This realm is believed to be populated by beings that are not visible to our physical senses, but are nonetheless real and influential in our lives. In this sense, the invisible other can refer to angels, spirits, or other non-physical entities. And when it says other non-physical entities, guys, there's a lot. If you were to go archive how many different fictional entities the human mind has created, you would be astonished. You would be astonished. It may compete against how many different type of species there are on Earth. Anyways, in religious traditions, the concept of an invisible other can also refer to a divine being or a deity that is beyond our comprehension and is not directly accessible through our physical senses. This can include the idea of a transcendent God in monotheistic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, or the idea of ultimate reality or the absolute in Eastern spiritual traditions like Hinduism and Buddhism. Regardless of the specific tradition, the concept of an invisible other serves to emphasize that there is more to the universe and our experience than we can perceive with our physical senses, and that there are powerful forces and beings that shape our lives and the world around us in ways that are beyond our understanding. So guys, you know what this means? This means, I'm expecting some universities in the future, to contact me, because if they're giving like degrees for physical research, it's like, what about metaphysical research? It's like, it's like there's something there, So, if you're someone who you've experienced the invisible other, you've experienced a moment beyond your senses, whatever, you're spiritual somehow. Let me tell you what you do. Okay, this is my attitude. First, you acknowledge that writing is a divine art form. It's a divine tradition. You go buy a sketchbook, not a lined book, and you buy, like, I don't know, a new pen or something. The whole point is new book, new pen. And you keep this around you, and you start treating your mind, where your imagination happens, as a temple. I don't know if you might be a secular person and you'd be like, Mr.Within, I've never been to a temple. What are you saying? I'll be like, okay, have you ever gone somewhere where you've taken off your shoes and you've gone into the space? So it's very important that humanity begins acknowledging its inner space. If you want to know how I acknowledge my inner space, I try to keep it so pure that if poetically, like, I'm just saying this poetically, if poetically God visits my mind, my inner realms is already like as clean as it could be. Do you know? And I'm being poetic. What it means is that if there's an important signal that my brain has to receive out of reality, I'm keeping my brain constantly like in a sort of, to me, when I abide by my decency, my soul feels clean. I don't know how else to say it. If somebody was like, Mr.Within, how do I clean my soul? I'll be like, okay, just be a decent person. That's it. That's the secret. Grandmothers are like the masters of this, of like teaching their grandkids decency, And decency, what you know what it means? It means realizing the greatness is way better than, the entertaining cruelty. Like what the WTF? What kind of fools have been like hurting the human species? This is the greatest thing in the void. Do you know? Like they like, even if there were extraterrestrials, imagine in the future diplomatically on Earth, right? And if a human being did something cruel to another human beings, even the extraterrestrials would be like, yo, human beings are part of this universe. You can't hurt another part of this universe. Can you imagine? That means when a human being hurts another human being, it's as if they are breaking interstellar, poetically, playfully, they're breaking interstellar law. Do you know? Mankind belongs to the greatness of the universal sector. We're a universal being here. But we're not acting like it. We're acting like, little thoughts. The wisdom 9-year-old yogis would attain in the Himalayas in the future, children by when they finish middle school, they would already attain. You know what it is? We're not actually shaped beings. We are beings that are so influenced by shape that we think we're shaped. And so there are forces, there is authority. My understanding of the divine, my understanding of the invisible other, strangely has been through this archetype, that has been through this idea that every soul has a rank. And souls of the same rank can notice each other. So what does that mean? That means there's certain beings that have authorizations to access certain states that other beings don't, regardless of how hard they try. This is even, you can see this in the Olympics too. See, this is the difference. This is how the difference between the young soul and the old soul. The young soul doesn't get permission and then animates as an entity. The old soul gets a permission, then animates as an entity. And somebody's like, yo, Mr. Within, what do you mean permission? You mean permission from God, the divine, the universal intelligence? And I'll be like, yeah. But not in the way like, yo, can I have permission? Not like that. It's through your decency. There's a state within every being that if they abide by it, they are authorized to do anything on this planet, but not in the outer realms. In the inner realms, they're authorized. In the outer realms, certain things, it's like you shouldn't even do. You shouldn't even contaminate your mind with it. You know? And some people may wonder, like, okay, how's this guy speaking to the whole species? And I'm speaking like an explorer. I'm speaking like a humble researcher. I'm speaking like someone who experienced the day where I shouted at the sky, why am I here? I literally asked his existence. I was like, God, truth, whatever that is truth in the world, whatever that's here, that has brought me here, why have you brought me here? Why am I existing here now, world? It was as if I asked this from the world, guys. I don't know if anybody's ever commanded a question from the world. And do you know what happened? What happened? The answer didn't come through words. The answer came through visions. Imagine a person asking for a prayer from God, and instead of them getting a sentence back, they getting inner films back. And I was stunned because I realized that I had made my moment so important that I thought it had to make sense to me. I had forgotten the presence of God, which even surpasses the games of the invisible. Do you see? The idea of God, okay, dear viewers, is, for me, I'm a very strange, my approach to it is very strange. Do you know? Because to me, God doesn't have the ideas is inconceivable, and that means it doesn't have an objective partner, and it doesn't have a subjective partner. God is not a name. Sure, people say there is the name of God, right? They chant the message of God, but it's the message. How many people read the message? Imagine your friend sends you a text message, says, yo, meet me at this coffee shop, right? But instead of you meeting them at the coffee shop, you start worshiping the text message. You make your grandkids worship the text message, and you never go to the coffee shop. You forgot that it was a message. It was a direction. It was something that had to transform the individual upon finding impact with it. You see, a true religious life is a life where the religious teachings actually have meaning, not as stories, but have meaning as experience. Because deep down, we are an experiential entity. Okay, and there's an inner life to every person and an outer life, which we are all in the same map. It's literally like a multiplayer online video game. Every day we wake up and we customize our characters. One person calls themselves a Muslim, one person calls them a Christian, one person calls themselves a Jew, you know, and what happens, right? They're all character customization in the void. Dear viewers, emptiness is our common denominator. Emptiness is our greatest, it's poetically